Good afternoon. I'm Cameron Steele, and welcome to the on-record portion of the Rockbridge Report. Michelle Singletary is a nationally syndicated columnist for the Washington Post. Michelle has joined us here today to shed some of her personal insight on the financial crisis. Thank you for joining us today, and welcome to WNL.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
The financial crisis that America faces today is one that is difficult to understand. Could you try to simplify where we stand as a nation and what, in your opinion, got us there?
Two things. What got us here? Credit and debt. And what's going to keep us here is credit and debt. I mean, it's really very simple. Too many people, too many corporations, including our government, borrowed too much money that they couldn't pay back. We were very heavily leveraged, from homeowners to companies to major Wall Street firms. I mean, it really is as simple as if you have a credit card and you overextended yourself on that credit card and you just kept making the minimum payments, and it got to a point where you couldn't make the minimum payments even though they were so low.
Well, your latest column discusses the folly of trying to blame the Community Reinvestment Act of 1977, or CRA. What is the CRA and why are people trying to blame it?
Well, whenever you have this kind of crisis, everyone wants to blame something or someone because they don't want to look back in the mirror and look at themselves. And so what some people are doing are blaming the Community Reinvestment Act, which was enacted to help low to moderate income families borrow. But here's the thing, qualified low, moderate to income families. And there was a time, you're way too young to remember this, where communities were redlined. So if you were African American or Hispanic or low income and you were in certain neighborhoods throughout this country, banks would not lend to you, even if you were qualified. And so CRA was enacted to say, listen, if you bank in these communities, you have to lend to these folks if they're qualified. And here's what it is. The banks had to use prudent and sound banking practices. But now that the housing market has crashed, and at the core of that crisis was subprime loans made to people with risky credit histories. And so people are connecting those dots, except those dots don't connect really when you look at the facts. The fact is that many of those borrowers were qualified under CRA. The loans that you hear on the news and people are hearing about were made through banks that were not regulated by CRA.
But how did such inadequate federal and state regulation go on for so long? Why didn't anyone catch on and try to stop the process until now?
Cash, money. People were making boatloads of money. People were getting rich. Lenders and mortgage brokers were making tons of money on these loans. Homeowners were seemingly making money on paper. Their home values looked like they couldn't stop from going up. And then people were just making so much money that no one thought this could crash. And they weren't looking at the underlying assets. They weren't looking at, are these homes really worth all of this? All these mortgages that were put together and packaged and sold, are they really that good? Could we really be lending money to all these people who before were not worthy? And then, like the credit card example I showed you, it all came that they couldn't even make the minimum payments on this. People couldn't make the mortgage payments on their homes, and it came crashing down. So it really is, it goes back to greed.
What do you think about the response of presidential candidates John McCain and Barack Obama to this, if there has been one?
Well, I think both candidates are coming up with plans that they had never thought about before. And I think each are very timid in proposing something that's going to anger the American public.
Right.
The American public wants to hang somebody. And I think a lot of the proposals, they've been very timid. They don't want to really do what is necessary. And what is necessary is to pull back on this credit. But to do so would mean further collapse. And no one is willing to take that. We don't want the credit to stop. We don't want the flow of credit to stop. And so, I don't know if anything that they propose right now is really going to help. I think what will happen is once we see who gets in the White House, that's when the elected candidate who will be president will make some hard decisions and will have to. At least I hope that person will.
Okay, well, what about the bailout or rescue plan that just was recently passed? Do you think that's going to be enough, or where do you think we should go from here as far as that goes?
I am not one of these people who were jumping up for joy when that $700 billion bailout was passed. It's still more credit, it's still more debt. The government's going to have to borrow it. And we see now that it wasn't enough. The news headlines every day we see, they're throwing more money at the institutions. We're nationalizing, in some respects, some of our largest banks. So, you know, I think it was not a good thing to make basically put the taxpayers on hook for what happened on Wall Street.
So what do you think needs to happen?
I don't think people really want to know what I think, because that would mean we need to stop using credit. We need to buy a home that we actually can afford. You and all your, not you, but young people have to stop using credit. We have to pay cash for the cars that we want. We have to roll back all the debt that we take on to do the things in life that we want. And no one wants to do that right now. So what would I do? I wouldn't extend more credit. Not as much as they're doing. But we're not going to do that right now. But that's what it's going to take to really fix what's wrong with this economy.
Well, thank you for your words of advice. Ms. Singletary came to Washington Lee this week to give a lecture on our nation's prospects in the aftermath of mortgage-turned financial crisis. Thank you. I'm Cameron Steele.